It feels like a lifetime ago, yet some days it's as fresh as yesterday. The memory of how I met Ashley is etched in my mind with an almost painful clarity, a bittersweet reminder of what once was. I still remember the first time I laid eyes on her. It was an ordinary day at a bustling coffee shop, where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. I was seated at a corner table, lost in a book, when she walked in. Ashley had an effortless grace about her, and the way she moved through the room drew my attention instantly. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she wore a simple but elegant outfit that perfectly complemented her figure. She stood in line, glancing at the menu, her fingers tapping impatiently on the counter. There was something captivating about her, an unpretentious charm that made it hard for me to look away. As she stepped up to place her order, I could feel a mix of nerves and excitement welling up inside me. "Excuse me," I finally gathered the courage to say, my voice slightly trembling. "I couldn't help but notice you seem like you've got a good taste in coffee. Mind if I ask what you're having?" She turned to me with a smile that seemed to light up the whole room. "Oh, it's just a vanilla latte. Nothing too fancy, but it's my favorite." I smiled back, feeling a strange but comforting ease in her presence. "Vanilla latte, huh? Sounds perfect. I'll have the same." We ended up sitting at a small table near the window, our conversation flowing effortlessly. It felt as if we had known each other for years. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our quirks, and even our dreams. She spoke with a passion that was both infectious and inspiring, and I found myself completely captivated. As the time flew by, I realized I didn't want the evening to end. We exchanged numbers, promising to meet again soon. That was the beginning of something beautiful. Over the next few months, we grew closer. Our shared interests blossomed into deeper connections, and soon, we were inseparable. The initial spark between us ignited into a burning flame, and every day spent together felt like a new adventure. Our dates became the highlight of my week, each one more memorable than the last. Whether it was a spontaneous road trip or a quiet evening at home, there was always an undercurrent of excitement and joy. Ashley was everything I had ever wanted and more. Her laughter was my favorite sound, her presence my greatest comfort. We built a life together, filled with love and hope, dreaming of a future where our happiness would only grow. As I look back now, the memories of those early days are a bittersweet reminder of what we had, a time when everything seemed possible, and the world was our playground. It's these memories that I cling to now, as I try to understand how we ended up where we are today. As the years rolled on, the vibrant colors of our early relationship began to fade into shades of gray. I still remember the warmth of Ashley's laughter, the way her eyes sparkled with mischief and joy. But somewhere along the line, that joy started to dwindle, and I found myself grappling with an overwhelming sense of disconnect. It was subtle at first, like a whisper in the back of my mind, but as time passed, it grew louder, demanding my attention. Life became a series of routines: wake up, go to work, come home, repeat. We both had demanding jobs, and it seemed that the more we worked, the less we connected. We'd sit across from each other at dinner, often lost in our own thoughts, the silence punctuated only by the sound of forks clinking against plates. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly turned into mundane exchanges about the day's events, stripped of the laughter and banter that once defined our relationship. At first, I attributed it to the stress of our jobs. After all, we both had deadlines to meet and responsibilities that weighed heavily on our shoulders. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, I began to feel an unsettling gap widening between us. We would go days without having a meaningful conversation, and I started to feel like I was living with a stranger rather than the woman I once adored. As I sat in our living room one evening, a sense of loneliness washed over me. I glanced at Ashley, who was curled up on the couch, engrossed in her phone. She seemed miles away, lost in a world I didn't belong to. I tried to engage her in conversation, asking about her day, but my words fell flat. She offered up short, distracted answers, her focus firmly fixed on whatever was happening on her screen. The lack of communication began to gnaw at me, leaving me feeling more isolated than ever. And then, there were the small changes, subtle yet significant. I noticed that Ashley was increasingly busy at work, often coming home late. At first, I tried to be understanding, reassuring myself that her job required her attention and dedication. But as the late nights became more frequent, my heart began to race with unease. I'd wait up for her, glancing at the clock, my mind racing with all the worst-case scenarios. Each time she walked through the door, I felt a mix of relief and suspicion. It was during one of those long, lonely evenings that the first seeds of doubt took root in my mind. I began to notice the little things. Her phone, which she had once left unlocked, was now always face down, the notifications silenced. When I asked about her day, her answers felt rehearsed, lacking the spontaneity they once had. The laughter that used to come so easily was replaced by forced smiles, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. The way she would avoid my gaze when I reached out to touch her. I tried to ignore my instincts, brushing them off as paranoia, but they only grew stronger. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen washing the dishes, I caught a glimpse of her through the doorway, her brow furrowed in concentration as she texted someone. My stomach twisted as I struggled to swallow the growing knot of anxiety. I wanted to trust her, I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that this was just a phase we were going through. But as the days turned into weeks, those thoughts began to feel more like denial than hope. The first true suspicion crept in when she mentioned a colleague, a name I hadn't heard before. "Oh, you know Mark? We've been working closely on a project," she said casually, her tone light, but my heart sank. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Why hadn't she mentioned him before? Why did it feel like there was a barrier between us, one that had sprung up so suddenly and without warning? In those moments of doubt, I found myself oscillating between anger and despair. I didn't want to accuse her, I didn't want to believe that she could betray me. But the signs were there, and they were impossible to ignore. The late nights, the secrecy, the emotional distance, it all painted a picture I was terrified to fully comprehend. As I lay in bed next to her at night, the space between us felt palpable. I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me, a chasm that I couldn't bridge. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, accusations, and fears. I wanted to reach out, to ask her about the changes, to demand the truth, but the fear of what I might find held me back. The image of the woman I had fallen in love with felt like a ghost, slipping away from me, and I was left desperately grasping at shadows. The realization that we were drifting apart hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent years building a life with Ashley, and now, it felt like everything was unraveling before my eyes. In those quiet, lonely moments, I found myself standing on the precipice of doubt, staring into an abyss that I was afraid to explore. Would I find the answers I sought, or would I uncover a truth that could shatter everything? It was a typical Saturday afternoon when I decided to meet up with my friend Jake at our favorite pub. The sun was shining, and despite the weight of anxiety sitting on my chest, I hoped a few cold beers and some laughter would help clear my mind. Jake had been my confidant for years, a steady presence in my life who always seemed to know how to lift my spirits. As I walked into the pub, the familiar sounds of clinking glasses and laughter filled the air. The warm, rustic decor offered a sense of comfort that I desperately needed. I spotted Jake at our usual corner table, waving me over with a grin that felt infectious. He had an easygoing nature, a quality that always put me at ease. We exchanged pleasantries and quickly fell into our usual banter, but I could feel the tension bubbling beneath the surface of my smile. I took a deep breath and decided to share my worries with him, hoping for a reassuring perspective. "Hey, man, can I talk to you about something?" I asked, leaning in a bit closer, lowering my voice to keep our conversation private. "Of course, what's up?" Jake replied, his brow furrowing slightly as he sensed the seriousness in my tone. "I've been feeling off about things with Ashley lately. It's like we're drifting apart, and I don't know what to do about it," I admitted, taking a long sip from my beer as I tried to steady my nerves. Jake nodded, listening intently. I poured out my concerns, describing how Ashley had become distant, the late nights at work, the secrecy with her phone. With every word, I felt the weight of my worries being laid bare between us. After I finished, Jake looked at me thoughtfully, his expression shifting from concern to something more serious. "You know, I've heard some things around the office," he began cautiously, choosing his words carefully. My heart sank at the prospect of rumors. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There have been whispers about Ashley and one of her colleagues, a guy named Mark. A few people have mentioned it in passing, how they've been spending a lot of time together." I didn't think much of it at first, but now. Jake trailed off, looking down at his drink. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I felt the air in the pub grow thick, suffocating me. Are you serious? I stammered, disbelief flooding my senses. What have you heard? Jake hesitated, clearly unsure of how to continue. It's just rumors, you know how it is. People talk, but I heard they were seen together outside of work, grabbing drinks, that sort of thing. Nothing concrete, but it's enough to raise an eyebrow. I felt my heart race, pounding against my ribs like a desperate plea for clarity. I wanted to dismiss it as mere gossip, the kind that always circulates in workplaces, but the growing unease within me wouldn't allow it. Did you hear this from someone reliable? I pressed, desperation creeping into my voice. Honestly, it was just some guys in the break room. They were joking about it, but the way they talked, it didn't sound like just idle chatter. Jake replied, his gaze shifting away, as if he were afraid to meet my eyes. The words hung heavily between us, and I could feel the ground shifting beneath my feet. My mind raced as I replayed the moments I had shared with Ashley, her late nights, her secretive phone habits. Had I been blind to the signs all along? I can't believe this, I murmured, feeling the weight of betrayal settle deep within me. The reality of the situation crashed over me like a wave, and I struggled to stay afloat. I thought we had something special, something solid. How could she? Jake reached across the table, placing a hand on my shoulder. Look, I'm not saying it's true. But you deserve to know what's going on. If there's something there, you need to confront her. The thought of confronting Ashley made my stomach twist into knots. I had always trusted her, believed in the love we had built together. The idea of facing her with these accusations felt unbearable, like stepping onto a battlefield with no armor. What if it's all just a misunderstanding? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Then you clear the air. But if it's not, you deserve to know the truth, Jake replied, his voice firm yet supportive. You can't keep living in this uncertainty. As I stared down into my drink, I felt the anger and betrayal mingling with the fear of losing her. The laughter and joy I had once known felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by this dark cloud of doubt. I just want to believe she wouldn't do something like that. But how can I be sure? I sighed, feeling lost. Jake leaned back, surveying me with a mix of concern and understanding. Trust your instincts, man. They usually know more than we do. You might need to confront her and ask the hard questions, no matter how difficult it is. I nodded, the weight of his words settling in. A part of me was terrified at the thought of confrontation, but I knew deep down that I couldn't ignore the whispers any longer. The shadows lurking in the corners of our relationship had grown too loud to ignore. As the evening wore on, I felt a storm brewing within me, a tempest of emotions I could no longer suppress. The laughter of other patrons faded into the background, replaced by the racing thoughts in my mind. I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and I had to decide whether to take that leap into uncertainty or remain in the comfort of ignorance. In that moment, I realized that the silence between Ashley and me was far more painful than the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. It was time to face the music, to confront the doubts that had taken root and to seek the answers I both dreaded and needed. The love we had built deserved that much, even if it meant risking everything. The days following my conversation with Jake felt like an eternity. Each moment I spent in our home was saturated with unease, every corner echoing with whispers of doubt. I tried to push aside my suspicions, but they loomed large in my mind, growing more insistent with every late night and every distracted glance from Ashley. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was profoundly wrong, but I also wanted to believe that I was overreacting. One afternoon, while doing some laundry, I noticed Ashley's phone charging on the kitchen counter. It was a simple moment, yet it felt monumental. The temptation to look was overwhelming, like standing at the edge of a cliff with the urge to jump. I knew it was wrong, but the anxiety that churned in my stomach drowned out any sense of morality. This was my chance to uncover the truth, to find the evidence I had been searching for. With a quick glance over my shoulder, I reached for her phone, my heart racing as I unlocked it. I hesitated for a moment, battling with the guilt that washed over me, but the pull to know the truth was too strong. My hands trembled slightly as I navigated to her messages. And then I saw it. There, in plain sight, was a thread of conversations between Ashley and Mark. My breath caught in my throat, and the world around me faded into a blur. As I read through the messages, each word felt like a stab to my heart. They exchanged jokes, shared flirty banter, and talked about meeting up after work, plans that were concealed from me as if they were an afterthought in a twisted game. My stomach twisted with betrayal, anger igniting like wildfire within me. I felt the walls closing in, suffocating me with the weight of this revelation. It was all right there, laid bare before me. The trust we had built together was crumbling, shattered by her deceit. I couldn't comprehend how Ashley, the woman I had loved so fiercely, could betray me in such a callous way. Each message I read deepened the fissures in my heart, confirming my worst fears and leaving no room for doubt. I put the phone down, my hands shaking. I felt like I had been blindsided by a tsunami of emotions, rage, sadness, and disbelief crashing over me in relentless waves. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but it felt impossible. I had to confront her, there was no other option left. That evening, as the sun began to set, casting shadows across our living room, I knew it was time. I paced back and forth, my mind racing with a million thoughts. Would she deny it? Would she try to explain? Or would she confess without hesitation? I felt a mixture of dread and resolve as I waited for her to come home. When Ashley finally walked through the door, her smile faltered at the sight of me standing there, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her tone bright yet uncertain. "Yeah, we need to talk," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Her expression shifted, and I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. "About what?" she asked cautiously, sensing the gravity of the moment. "About you and Mark," I said, my heart pounding in my chest. I could see her demeanor change in an instant, the color draining from her face. "I found your messages." Silence enveloped the room, heavy and suffocating. I watched as the reality of my words sank in, the fight leaving her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Is it true?" I demanded, my voice rising, the anger spilling over. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Ashley took a deep breath, her composure slipping away. "Chris, she began, but I interrupted her, unable to contain the torrent of emotions any longer. "You lied to me. For how long, Ashley? How long have you been seeing him?" The words erupted from me, raw and filled with hurt. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped closer, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." "A mistake?" I echoed, incredulous. "This isn't just a mistake, this is betrayal. You've been planning meetings, sharing jokes, hiding it all from me." "I was trying to figure things out," she shouted back, her frustration igniting. "We've been so distant, and I didn't know how to fix it. I thought it was harmless at first, but it spiraled out of control." My heart shattered further with each word she spoke. I had been right to worry, our distance had driven her to someone else, and now she was standing in front of me, trying to justify her infidelity. "You thought it was harmless?" I asked, incredulous. "You didn't think about how it would destroy everything we built together?" I know, she pleaded, stepping forward again, reaching for me, but I recoiled. "I messed up, Chris. I didn't want to hurt you, Then why did you?" I interrupted, my voice breaking. "How could you think that keeping this from me was better than just being honest? We could have worked through our problems together." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was scared, Chris. I didn't know how to talk to you. I thought I was losing you, and I didn't want to admit it. I thought maybe finding a connection with someone else would help me realize what I really wanted. But it didn't help, did it?" I said bitterly. "All it did was make everything worse. You broke my trust, and now I don't know if I can ever believe you again." The reality of our situation settled around us, the air heavy with sorrow and regret. The love we had shared now felt like a distant memory, replaced by a chasm of pain and betrayal. I felt shattered, lost in a whirlwind of emotions, struggling to find my footing in a relationship that had once felt so secure. "I never wanted to hurt you," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I love you, Chris. I really do. Please, can we try to fix this?" The weight of her words hung in the air, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The love I once had for her was entangled with anger and disappointment, leaving me at a crossroads. I felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under me, and I was left to navigate a broken landscape. "I need time," I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just pretend this didn't happen. You need to understand how much you've hurt me." As I turned away, the sound of her cries echoed in the empty room. I felt the tears welling in my own eyes as I fought against the pain threatening to overwhelm me. I had loved her fiercely, and now, in the wake of her betrayal, I felt like a part of me had been ripped away, leaving only fragments of what we once were. In that moment, I realized that our relationship would never be the same. I had to confront the truth of what had happened and face the long, difficult path ahead. The journey from here would be uncertain, but I knew I had to find my way through the darkness, even if it meant letting go of the woman I once loved. The days turned into a blur of anger and betrayal after that explosive confrontation with Ashley. The hurt had settled deep within me, twisting like a knife in my gut every time I thought about what she had done. I tried to carry on with my daily routine, but it felt like I was going through the motions, a hollow shell of the person I once was. The laughter and warmth of our home had been replaced by a cold silence, an ever-present reminder of the love I had lost and the trust that had been shattered. Each time I saw her in the house, my heart burned with rage. She had taken everything from me: the security of our relationship, the dreams we had built together, and my sense of self-worth. I could still hear her pleas for forgiveness echoing in my mind, but they no longer had the power to sway me. Instead, they fueled a dark desire for revenge, a need to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me. I sat alone in our living room one night, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. The dim light from the lamp cast shadows on the walls, and I found myself staring into the depths of the darkness, contemplating my next move. I had a decision to make, one that would change the course of our lives forever. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that a simple argument or heartfelt conversation wouldn't suffice. No, Ashley needed to understand the full impact of her actions, to feel the repercussions of her betrayal in every facet of her life. It wasn't enough for her to simply say "I'm sorry." I wanted her to experience the devastation that had taken root in my heart, and the only way to achieve that was to strike at the very foundation of her life, her career and her relationships. As I sat there, the plan began to take shape in my mind. I thought about her job, the long hours she spent at the office, the way she had built her reputation through hard work and dedication. What would happen if that were all taken away from her? What if I could expose the truth about her infidelity to her boss and colleagues? The mere thought sent a surge of satisfaction through me. She would face the consequences of her choices, and I would be the one to hold her accountable. I imagined sending an anonymous email to her supervisor, detailing the late-night meetings and the flirtatious exchanges with Mark. It would be easy enough to compile evidence, to create a narrative that painted Ashley as the untrustworthy employee she had become. The idea of watching her face the fallout from such a revelation filled me with a dark sense of glee. I could already picture the shock on her colleagues' faces, the whispers that would follow her around the office like a ghost. But it didn't stop there. I thought about her family, the ones she had deceived by portraying a perfect life while hiding her secrets. I could contact her parents, share the painful truth about their daughter's betrayal. They deserved to know the reality behind the smiling facade they had been presented with for so long. I could envision their disappointment, the heartbreak in their eyes as they learned that the daughter they thought they knew was capable of such deceit. The more I considered it, the more clarity I found in my intentions. Revenge became a driving force, a way to regain some semblance of control over the chaos that had invaded my life. I felt empowered by the idea that I could dismantle the world Ashley had constructed, piece by piece. The power dynamics of our relationship had shifted, and I was no longer the one who felt helpless. As the nights passed, I spent hours strategizing, planning every detail meticulously. I envisioned crafting the perfect message to her boss, detailed enough to raise suspicions but vague enough to conceal my identity. I thought about how I could time everything perfectly, ensuring that the revelations would come to light at the most damaging moment. I would send it during a busy work week when stress levels were already high, making the impact of the news hit even harder. But I didn't want it to be just a one-time event. I wanted to ensure that the repercussions would linger, that the fallout would continue to ripple through her life. I envisioned creating a series of anonymous communications, emails, messages, anything that would keep her on edge, make her second-guess every interaction. The thought of her feeling paranoid, looking over her shoulder, wondering who was out to get her, thrilled me. Each idea felt like a release, a way to channel my pain into something more productive. I found myself smiling in the quiet of the night, my anger morphing into a sense of purpose. The bitterness that had consumed me now transformed into a calculated resolve. I was no longer a victim, I would be the architect of her downfall. Yet, beneath the surface of my vengeful thoughts, a small part of me wrestled with the morality of my intentions. Was this really who I wanted to become? The anger felt justified, but I couldn't ignore the nagging voice reminding me that revenge often led to more pain than satisfaction. Still, that voice was drowned out by the louder, more insistent call for justice. I reasoned that Ashley had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences. After all, she had made me feel worthless, had shattered my trust and faith in our relationship. I needed her to understand that actions had consequences. And I was ready to make sure she felt every single one of them. As I sat there in the dim light, the weight of my decision hung heavy in the air. I could feel the darkness wrapping around me, and for the first time in days, I felt a sense of clarity. Revenge was no longer just a fleeting thought, it had become a plan, a mission that would give me back the control I had lost. With a newfound sense of determination, I set my sights on the path ahead. The wheels were in motion, and I was ready to unleash the storm that would shatter Ashley's world. I would make her understand the depth of my hurt, the pain that she had so callously inflicted upon me. And in doing so, I hoped to reclaim a piece of myself that had been lost in the chaos of betrayal. In the aftermath of my decision to seek revenge, a sense of purpose surged through me like a current. The idea of dismantling Ashley's world became an all-consuming fire, and I found myself immersed in the meticulous task of gathering evidence. Each photograph, each message, felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place, providing me with the ammunition I needed to execute my plan. I started by going through her phone again, an act that felt increasingly invasive but necessary. This time, I was on a mission, determined to uncover every detail I could find. I combed through the messages with Mark, retracing the steps of their illicit conversations. It felt surreal, the way her words had shifted from loving and tender to flirtatious and secretive. I made mental notes of the most damning exchanges, the ones that would illustrate the betrayal vividly. As I gathered the evidence, a dark thrill coursed through me. I snapped screenshots of their chats, ensuring I had every flirtatious quip and suggestive comment stored safely away. I felt like a detective piecing together a case, driven by a desperate need to expose the truth. But with each message I saved, a lingering doubt began to creep in, echoing in the back of my mind. Was this really the right thing to do? As I sorted through the photos, I stumbled upon images that felt even more incriminating, pictures of Ashley and Mark at a bar, laughing together, their bodies leaning in close. I recalled the night it had been taken, a casual outing that had seemed innocent at the time. I had been home, waiting for her, oblivious to the fact that she was creating memories with someone else. The bitterness bubbled up inside me again, and I felt a mix of anger and a twisted sense of satisfaction at having these tangible reminders of her infidelity. But the deeper I dug, the more conflicted I became. Each piece of evidence felt like a dagger, cutting into my heart and forcing me to confront the reality of our relationship. I had once seen Ashley as my partner, my confidant, the person I could trust above all else. Yet now, every photograph was a reminder of her betrayal, a reminder of the love that had soured. The internal struggle intensified as I continued my search for evidence. I questioned whether I was justified in doing this, whether seeking revenge would truly heal the wounds she had inflicted on me. Deep down, I knew I was crossing a line, becoming the very thing I despised. My thoughts raced back to our happier days, the laughter we shared, and the dreams we built together. It felt almost surreal to think that I was now plotting her downfall, driven by pain and anger. Each time I saved a photograph or a message, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. Was this the legacy I wanted to create? Was I willing to destroy everything Ashley had worked for in order to satiate my anger? As I leaned back in my chair, the flickering light of the screen casting shadows across the room, I couldn't help but feel the conflict raging within me. The notion of revenge had become intoxicating, a means to reclaim my power and expose the betrayal, but it was also isolating. I was treading a dangerous path, one that could lead to irreparable damage not only to Ashley but also to myself. I imagined the moment when I would reveal the evidence to her boss, the potential fallout that could follow. Would she lose her job? Would her family turn against her? In those moments of doubt, I couldn't help but recall the times when we had worked together through our struggles. Our shared dreams and plans had once felt invincible, but now they lay shattered at my feet. I had always believed in honesty, in confronting issues head-on rather than resorting to manipulation or deception. And yet, here I was, preparing to wield the very tools I had once abhorred. I needed to clear my head. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself amid the chaos. I stepped away from the screen, allowing myself to reflect on what I was about to do. The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but I realized I had a choice to make, to let revenge consume me or to find a healthier way to process the hurt. Yet the idea of simply walking away felt impossible. I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't take action, I would be allowing Ashley to escape the consequences of her actions. She had hurt me deeply, and I felt compelled to make sure she understood the depth of her betrayal. As I sat in silence, the evidence I had gathered loomed like a specter in my mind. Would exposing her infidelity truly bring me peace, or would it only deepen the wounds? I felt trapped in a cycle of pain, each moment spent gathering evidence pulling me deeper into the darkness. With a heavy heart, I decided I needed to take one last step back. I would go through everything I had collected once more, reconsidering each piece of evidence and the impact it would have. I wanted to ensure that my actions were deliberate, that they carried the weight of the hurt I had endured without spiraling into a realm of vindictiveness that I might not be able to control. That night, as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I pondered the choice I had before me. The thrill of revenge clashed with the voice of reason that urged me to seek a healthier resolution. I realized that the decision to expose Ashley's betrayal would not only alter her life but would also change me in ways I could not fully grasp. I would have to find a way to navigate the consequences of my choices, both for her and for myself. As sleep finally took hold of me, I was left with the lingering question: would revenge truly bring closure, or would it only deepen the scars we both carried? The answer eluded me, leaving me in a state of uncertainty as I drifted into restless dreams. The path forward remained obscured, but one thing was clear. I was at a crossroads, and the choices I made from here on would shape not only our lives but my own sense of self as well. The day had finally come. I sat at my desk, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on my chest. The photographs and messages I had painstakingly collected were spread out before me like evidence in a court case, each one representing a piece of Ashley's betrayal. I had envisioned this moment countless times, picturing the reactions of everyone involved, but now that it was here, a churning mix of excitement and dread surged within me. I opened my email, my hands trembling slightly as I composed messages to both her boss and her parents. The cursor blinked in front of me, taunting me as I struggled to find the right words. How do you convey the gravity of someone's actions in a few simple lines? How do you ensure that the recipients grasp the reality of the situation without me being there to explain? I could feel my heart racing as I stared at the screen, the tension mounting with every second. After several false starts, I finally found a message that felt right. I addressed the email to her boss first, keeping it professional yet direct. I introduced myself as a concerned party, explaining that I had evidence of unprofessional behavior that could impact her standing within the company. I attached the photographs and screenshots, knowing that each image would speak for itself. With a deep breath, I hit send, watching as the email disappeared into the ether. It was done. Next came her parents. This felt more personal. As I typed their email address, a flood of memories washed over me: family gatherings, the laughter shared over holiday dinners, and the kindness they had always shown me. I had loved Ashley, but I had also loved her family. Sending this email felt like a betrayal on a different level, but the hurt coursing through me overpowered those sentiments. I had to make them understand what kind of person their daughter had become. I crafted a more heartfelt message, expressing my concern and disappointment. I shared how deeply their daughter had hurt me and attached the same evidence, emphasizing the need for them to know the truth about Ashley's choices. Once again, I hesitated, but my resolve won out, and I clicked send. As the messages flew off into cyberspace, a wave of satisfaction washed over me. I had taken control, I had acted. For a brief moment, I felt vindicated. The power dynamics had shifted. I was no longer the victim, but rather the one holding the cards. Yet, as the adrenaline began to fade, an unsettling feeling crept in. Guilt. I had unleashed a storm that would wreak havoc on Ashley's life, her career, and her relationships. What had once felt like a justified act of revenge began to feel heavy and burdensome. I thought about her parents, the love they had for their daughter, and how this revelation would shatter their perception of her. I had always respected them, and now I had betrayed that respect in the name of retribution. The internal conflict roiled within me, twisting my insides as I wrestled with my emotions. Had I truly done the right thing? I had thought I was reclaiming my power, but now I was haunted by the potential consequences of my actions. My heart ached as I envisioned Ashley's face, the shock and humiliation that would wash over her when she received the news. I could almost hear her voice, filled with disbelief, as she processed what I had done. I tried to push the guilt away, reminding myself that this was what she deserved. But in doing so, I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that I had crossed a line I could never uncross. I had become the very thing I had despised, someone willing to hurt another person in retaliation for their wrongdoings. The fallout came swiftly. The next day, I woke up to a flurry of notifications on my phone, emails from Ashley's boss, texts from friends, and even a call from a mutual friend asking if I was okay. The weight of what I had done began to settle in as I read through the messages. Ashley had been called into her boss's office, and her parents had been notified. I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart racing as I imagined the chaos unfolding around me. I could picture Ashley's boss, a stern man known for his no-nonsense attitude, confronting her about the evidence I had sent. I imagined her stumbling over her words, trying to explain herself while grappling with the weight of my revelations. Would she cry? Would she try to defend herself? The image filled me with a dark sense of satisfaction, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of what I had set in motion. Then the call started. First, it was Ashley. I didn't answer. I wasn't ready to face her yet, to hear the desperation in her voice as she tried to salvage what was left of her dignity. I could only imagine the rage and hurt that had filled her when she realized I was the one behind the betrayal. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was her mother. I hesitated but eventually picked up. The hurt in her voice cut through me like a knife. "What have you done?" she asked, her voice trembling. I could hear the disappointment, the confusion, and the heartache all rolled into one. I had torn apart the very fabric of the family I had once been welcomed into, and for what? "I had to tell you," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. "You needed to know." But even as I said the words, I could feel the weight of my decision crashing down on me. I could sense the family's pain, the way my actions had shattered their trust and altered their perception of Ashley. The guilt swelled again, threatening to engulf me. Later that day, I finally mustered the courage to check social media, a move that felt like diving into the deep end of a pool filled with anxiety. My heart sank as I scrolled through the posts and comments, each one a painful reminder of the chaos I had unleashed. Friends were speculating, whispering about Ashley's downfall, and the word disgrace appeared more than once. I could hardly bear to read the comments, each one felt like a dagger aimed at my heart. And then there was Ashley's reaction. It came as a series of texts, messages filled with anger, confusion, and heartbreak. "How could you?" she wrote. "I thought you loved me." Each word was like a punch to my gut, and as I read through them, I felt my heart breaking for the girl I had once loved. "I do love you," I finally typed back, my fingers trembling over the screen. "But you betrayed me. I had to show you the consequences." The conversation spiraled quickly. She accused me of being cruel, of being vindictive, of wanting to ruin her life. And in many ways, she was right. I had crossed a line that I couldn't uncross, and now I was left grappling with the aftermath of my choices. As the days unfolded, I watched Ashley's world unravel. She was pulled from her projects at work, her colleagues avoided her, and the shame of her actions hung over her like a dark cloud. I could see the toll it took on her. The vibrant, lively person I had once known was fading away, replaced by someone who was hurt and broken. Each sighting or news of her suffering felt like a heavy stone dropped into my heart, sending ripples of regret through me. What had I achieved? I had set out to reclaim my power and teach her a lesson. But all I had done was destroy the woman I once loved. I had shattered not just her career, but also her spirit. The victory I had felt when I hit send was gone, replaced by a deep sense of loss. At night, I lay awake, replaying every moment in my head. The laughter we once shared, the plans we had made, all replaced by a bitter reality. I wondered if there was a way back from this, if there was a chance for reconciliation. But with every passing day, it became clearer that the bridge between us had been burned to ashes. In the weeks that followed, as I watched the fallout unfold, I struggled to find a sense of closure. I had wanted revenge, but I was left feeling hollow and remorseful. The satisfaction I had anticipated never came. Instead, I was left with a profound sense of grief for what we had lost. As I sat alone in our home, now just a shell of its former self, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost a part of myself in this twisted game of vengeance. The price of my actions weighed heavily on my soul, and I couldn't help but wonder if I had truly achieved anything at all. In the end, I had set out to teach her a lesson, but all I had done was destroy the love we once shared.